All right, welcome back to Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. I'm your host, Ryan, and we're going to be discussing the Infinity Stones from the MCU today. And I know that's a bit of a different topic from what we kind of usually go to concerning our, premise around philosophy and spirituality and kind of personal development and self-expression, but we're going to kind of be drawing parallels to how this is represented in film. And maybe we'll start off today just kind of referencing maybe some of the historical concepts that have come about over the years concerning the parallels with some of the things we've seen in the MCU. So let's talk about the Greeks for a second. They actually, interestingly enough, had a conceptualization of a force that was known as the ether, which was essentially this almost air that the gods breathe, and it was almost this higher state of air that is somewhat above the usual air that we humans, or mortals as they would say, breathe. And it was almost this divine essence or divine force. So also in physics, we kind of see this same term repeated with the ether. It's spelled a little bit differently. In the Greek mythology, it's spelled Aether. In physics, it's spelled Ether. But this was essentially, in physics, this uncorruptible material that almost weaves together the fabric of space-time, which is almost this concept beyond light, beyond materiality. It was almost a force that allowed everything to come into existence. So going back to the MCU, we can tie this in by seeing, like, for example, in the movie Thor: The Dark World, we see the reality stone, or the force, or this power known as the ether, which was this fluid-like substance that had the ability to rewrite reality. So when we kind of brush up on our history and brush up on like some of these topics that we see in physics, we can kind of parallel it with what we see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and within film in general. I think since humans have kind of created film since the beginning of the time that we've done that from, or even in literature, we've always seen themes that parallel history come into play in film or in cinema. So understanding that some of these concepts are not as far-fetched as we think they are, and it doesn't mean that, like, if you have a golden gauntlet that you can, like, snap whatever you want into existence, but it does mean that the possibility of doing something like that is not something that is beyond conceptualization or beyond imagination. I think that a lot of times that we as humans, when we don't see instant results, or we don't see something instantly manifest itself or materialize itself within our physical reality, we think it's not happening, or we find a lack of power or feel a lack of power within ourselves. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because a lot of times the things that we do imagine, they do come to fruition. You can even think of, if we're going back to history, like, the first plane, or the Wright brothers plane. Somebody had to conceptualize how that would function before it actually became something in physicality. So the power of imagination is almost equated to this, like, divine force that we talk about here, right? Almost like a power of the gods or power of the divine. So your imagination, I truly believe that the ability that you have, or the amount you are able to stretch, or I would say have your imagination in this mutable state where it's bendable or prone to flux, is the ability that you have to almost bring things into your reality. If you think about it, um, let's even like what we've talked about in the past with like the four elements, right? Like there's different states. Stone is not very prone to change. Wind is very prone to change, right? So if you kind of equate that to the way you perceive the world and you perceive yourself, if you perceive yourself as, something like a stone that, you don't have the ability to change, or you don't want to change, or your mindset is very rigid and based in structure, but, almost you're a victim of your own inability to change, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? If you allow yourself to be. But you also have the ability to change very greatly, right? So creating balance within all these structures kind of allows for this like divine force to I guess intertwine with you in a sense, right? And allows your ability of imagination to really run wild to the place where you want it to go. But cultivating that sense of almost like childlike imagination where like nothing is beyond conceptualization or beyond your imagination, I feel like is the imperative I guess concept to doing that, right? So, and I like that term actually that I use, childlike, because we've talked about in the past how, for example, first 7 years of life, we have none of those like pre-programmed like I guess programs you would say that like are put in there by society that tells us like, okay, well, this thing works like this and this thing works like that. If you are in that state of like what they call theta, and you're in that downloading period, it's almost like your subconscious, or all the minds, the super conscious mind, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, is wide open to change, right? And in that state, you are in a place of creation. You're in a place to input the information that you want, right? So kind of going back to talking about these aspects of reality that are kind of embodied within these stones, if you kind of connect with the essence of maybe what they represent, in a sense, where we're talking about, okay, like they have also like the Mind Stone in the MCU. What does that like relate to? I guess you can say that relates to one's ability to stretch their conceptualization of something, or stretch their ability to utilize consciousness, right? Or to imagine something, or to focus on something over a prolonged period. And if you think about that, that's kind of the way like everything in life works, right? Like before you almost do something, you have to conceptualize it, or you have to have some kind of like notion that propels you towards that thing, right? It's almost like let's say you have a like a puzzle, right? And you want to put it together. But if you don't have a picture of what the puzzle is supposed to look like, or you can't visualize what the puzzle is supposed to look like when it's done or when it's complete, how are you supposed to put it together, right? So it's really not just a matter of like, just trial and error all the time. It is a sense of like, okay, well, can I surrender to my imagination? Can I allow it to conceptualize that which I want? And I feel like that comes with like understanding also your internal resistance as well, in the sense where you allow this like greater force or greater sense of imagination to kind of express itself through you, and understanding that you are not simply what you perceive yourself to be, but you're actually the thing that is perceiving. So when you kind of realize that, you kind of step outside the identity of being you, or the program of being you, right? And you have the ability to put in a new program or rewrite your destiny, right? So going back to the stones, especially when we talk about, this concept of ether, which is like the reality stone in the MCU, we're talking about really the materialized essence of the ability to conceptualize a reality based around the way that you want it, right? And I think that part of that comes with kind of dropping our preconceived notions about the way the world works. And one of the things that I previously said in a video I made, it wasn't an episode that we did on the show, but it was something that I did outside. I recently said that, and I think I was talking about martial arts at the time, but it comes with a sense of humility and saying that let me forget, or not, well, maybe not forget, but let me drop everything that I think I know, or let me drop everything I know up until now, and start from now. And I feel like maybe that's one of the most powerful things you can actually do in life, or mentalities that you can take on, that if I start my life from like right now, if I start like my being or the way I want to move through the world from right now, if the story started from right now, how would I play out that story, right? How would I want that story to unfold, right? And I think that one of the most fundamental aspects to that kind of aspect of life is just realizing that, all the things that we like correlate with, like maybe sins or self-doubt or limiting beliefs, all that can just be let go of, because like you're the person who has experienced all those things but has the potential to kind of turn the picture around so it can be viewed in the way that you want it, so it assists you moving forward, right? If you don't want to replay the same story, then you have to be able to discern, okay, well, what did I learn from this experience, and what parts of that should I take moving forward, right? So it's I don't know, it's kind of like almost discerning like the influences that you want around you and the influences that maybe are not serving you, or that you can release, that are not necessary anymore, right? And I think that's a fundamental aspect to life. Like life is constantly a process of like always moving forward, always growing, and part of that comes with letting go, right? But as human beings, like since the beginning of time, if there's one fundamental thing I think human beings have, is that we don't like change, right? It's necessary, it's part of our life and reality in, the cosmos, but it's not something that we instinctually are geared towards. So kind of letting go is hard sometimes, right? But if we can like understand that, letting go actually comes with becoming the best version of ourselves, and that if we let go, like that is actually what we need to move forward. Like we always think that, okay, well, maybe we need to do this or do that in order to like become this version. But if you just say that, hey, like I'm already that version of myself that I want to be, if I just let go and surrender to that version of myself that I already know exists right here, right now, then there's nothing to fear. I can just move forward. I can cultivate this greater sense of empowerment within myself, right? So I feel like that is one of the fundamental aspects to understanding this kind of conceptualization of how we relate this back to us, right? So letting go. So that's kind of a concept around, reality, which maybe is parallel to some of the stuff we see in the MCU, just around the reality stone. I think this kind of overlaps with what we see in the movie Infinity War and Endgame also too, with like the soul stone, right? Like they say, in order to take the stone, you must give up that which you love. And like Thanos has to sacrifice Gamora, and like Widow jumps off the cliff in order to like save Barton or Hawkeye and get the stone, right? But essentially that was because the stone required that the user understand its power by realizing that the essence of letting go of something that they held deep within themselves, even if it wasn't like, the end all and be all, because obviously Thanos is like, well, if it comes down to Gamora, which is like, almost this materialized person of, the slight glimmer of light in his heart or whatever, versus his destiny. He's like, okay, well, I can't ignore my destiny, or I ignored my destiny once. I think he says something like that. So he has to sacrifice her in order to get the stone, right? And Red Skull, who's like, now kind of this phantom. He's not the same kind of Red Skull that we see in Captain America, the First Avenger. He's kind of like this like cosmic wraith who has this like knowledge of like the stones, and almost like this divine or cosmic consciousness now, where he has this insight into what the stone's purpose actually is, and how it fits into this bigger picture. He says that the stone has a certain wisdom about it, right? Like it knows, it's not just this inanimate object or this force of power, which is able to do things with no rhyme or reason. But the soul stone has a certain wisdom that it's almost sentient, right? It has almost a force or will of its own, and to ensure that the person who wields it understands that aspect, they must connect with that aspect within themselves by giving up something that is held within them, right? So, and this stone actually, it has the ability over life and death. It has the ability to send souls into this pocket dimension, which is like almost this like a land of infinite waters, where all the souls that have passed on reside. The soul stone also has the ability to utilize the souls or spirits of the dead. So there's a whole lot of interesting actually aspects to this reality, this soul stone, right, which was not touched as much on as the other stones in the MCU. And it was said that actually the soul stone is probably the most powerful, or the most almost volatile of all the other stones, because it has a sentience about it, and because it has almost a sentience or wisdom of itself, right? So going back to like the rest of the stones, we see like the Tesseract, the space stone, which has the ability to kind of eliminate the distance between 2 points in space and time, which is pretty interesting concept actually, because like one of the things that I was actually talking about with a friend from philosophy class recently was just about the concept of consciousness acting almost like similar to the effect known in physics as a magnetic wormhole, which is essentially where a magnetic field can appear and disappear over a distance and then reappear, and can affect matter with that magnetic field, even though the distance in between the distance in between the 2 points in space, or 2 points in space time, is the magnetic field's not detectable. So if you think of or conceptualize a thought, it's almost like this fleeting thing, which is it's boop, it's in existence, and then boop, it's out of existence, right? Unless you direct more energy to keeping it there and maintain this connection, it vanishes, right? So I feel like that's similar to this concept of what a magnetic wormhole actually is. And maybe this kind of relates also to the Mind Stone, where we're talking about the effect of consciousness, or what's the word that they use, telepathic and telekinetic. So getting inside someone's mind and then also manipulating things with the mind, right? So we also see that in the MCU embodied in the scepter, and then it is eventually given to the Vision, which actually makes him actually a sentient being that is a combination of all these other personalities like Ultron, Jarvis, Tony, Bruce, right? So all of these aspects of consciousness are kind of embodied within the stone, and then the stone actually translates into being embodied within Vision, right? So he has this kind of connection with the stone, and Wanda, who has similar powers, is actually able to almost communicate with the same energy, right? So it's interesting how a lot of these overlap, just concerning how like the Tesseract is, it actually in the movie, the first Avengers movie, the scepter was actually, we didn't know it at the time that it held an Infinity Stone within it. That was actually the power which allowed them to close the portal that the Tesseract created, because after it opened this portal, which, the army came through and Loki's army invading Earth and whatever, the barrier surrounding the energy that was opening the portal was impenetrable, right? And it was only able to be closed by energy of the same nature, which was the scepter. So it kind of parallels the concept that, divine aspects of reality can interact with each other and can almost be a countering force, or a force that can negate the effect of some of these other aspects of reality, right? So going back to just the space stone and kind of summing up that concept of magnetic wormholes, we don't like conceptualize these concepts a lot because, we can't really see it. We can't visualize a magnetic wormhole because magnetism is something we can't really see with our eyes. We can see the effects of magnetism, but we can't physically see a magnetic field, right? Like, even if you wanted to, you can put, iron filings on paper and have a magnetic field around it, and you can see the magnetic field lines, but again, you're only seeing the effect of that magnetic field. You're not seeing the actual force itself, right? So invisible forces do have an influence on things in the material world. And remember, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And again, we only see a very small fraction of the light spectrum. Even if you're somebody who, sun gazes and, like the Egyptians used to do, and you work on opening your third eye, you're still only going to see a fraction of that spectrum, right? It might go up slightly, in order to, see very subtle energies within the spectrum. But ultimately, there are just so many energies out there in the cosmos, even in this room right now. There's radio waves all around us. And we can't see them, but it doesn't mean they're not there, right? So that's really a fundamental aspect to kind of understanding a lot of these principles, just the way reality kind of operates, right? Maybe I shouldn't say reality, because reality in this case actually is relating to a specific stone, but in any case, you know what I'm saying. Moving on, we also have the Power Stone, which kind of embodies just this unlimited aspect of pure power, which has the ability to kind of just provide physical strength, or energy that is kind of unbounded. So it's kind of more of a direct force. Almost, you can think of it a little bit like gravity, right? Almost like gravity is just a force that is just constant, right? If you think of a black hole, actually, interestingly enough, little tip for people who are interested in the MCU, there was actually a point in the Marvel comics where all the Infinity Stones actually fell into a black hole and kind of disappeared. So that was actually pretty interesting. But I think it just kind of goes to show that the force that is needed to kind of separate some of those things from, maybe falling into the wrong hands is nothing short of a black hole, right? So I don't know, that I found that pretty interesting. But in any case, you can compare the Power Stone almost like the force of gravity, right? Which is just this constant force, which is always moving in the same direction. It's not impeded by anything. It's something that kind of permeates all of space-time, or the parts of space-time that it does exist in. But the concept of this force that is moving in one direction, and there's no kind of, I would say, kind of disruption in that energy, where it's almost like an alternating current or whatever, but it's just direct, is that really relates to kind of the same concept of the power stone, right? So it's really the ability to cultivate this sense of just overwhelming energy or overwhelming power that can't be impeded, right? So, and in the MCU, it does kind of play into the role of energizing or providing or fueling all the other stones and amplifying their power, right? So we also have the time stone, which is pretty interesting. In the MCU, it actually is the known as like the Eye of Agamotto, or in the I guess you can say in the films, it's seen as the Eye of Agamotto, which Doctor Strange protects. And you can use this to create temporal paradoxes, to essentially warp the fabric of time in the sense where it could cause temporal disruptions. It can also cause branches of space-time, or branches of time rather. It can lead to parallel timelines or parallel futures, or alternate futures, I should say. So the time stone is another kind of aspect, which is kind of similar to power, but it's almost like this circular movement, right? So this is kind of a aspect of the stones that is based around almost this fluid aspect to reality that allows things to unfold, right? So, and if you had this stone, basically, like, every point in your life that you made like a decision where you're like, okay, well, if I knew that would happen, then maybe I'd do this to get this outcome or whatever. You can just rewind time and then boop, like you're back and have the ability to undo it, right? So it's kind of interesting. And in the movie, we see Doctor Strange just kind of able to see all the possible futures and possible outcomes of the timeline, and then he says like there's only one where they actually win, right? And this is the one where Tony is the one who snaps the gauntlet, or snaps with the stones, and sets everything right. So that is the time stone. It's pretty interesting, the ability to create paradoxes, temporal loops. Like, it's even said actually in the first Doctor Strange movie, I believe it was, by Mordo, like, you want to get stuck reliving the same moment over and over again forever, or never having existed at all. And he says like, time loops, temporal paradoxes, time branching, like all these effects that can occur as a result of the time stone. So I believe there's only one stone that we haven't covered yet, or did we cover all of them? Space stone we covered the power stone, covered the reality stone, we covered the time stone, we covered the mind stone, so that's 5, and we covered the soul stone, so that's 6. And maybe we'll get the image up now, actually, if it's so with the kind of stones presented in this dynamic, we can kind of see how all of them relate to an aspect of the world or of the cosmos. And actually, interestingly enough, in the comics, when we talk about the stones, they actually originally came from an ultimate omnipotent being known as Nemesis, and she was this almost like divine goddess who had the ability, well, I mean, nothing kind of really existed at that point, because she was all of existence, and it was said that, her branching off into these different aspects of herself into the stones was what allowed the universe or the cosmos to form in the way that it did. And in the comics, there's actually another stone, which is known as the Ego Stone, or the Ego Gem, and it was said to carry the sentience almost of this being known as Nemesis. And when all the stones would be reunited or together, that Nemesis would return. So that's an interesting concept. We're not going to go too much into that, but I just kind of wanted to relay that interesting point that it's almost like the stones do have a sentience to them, that they all communicate with each other, and all the aspects of reality kind of have a synergy or melody to it, almost like an instrument, right? Like you have the tuning and like, like the frets and stuff like that. So I don't know, there's all these different aspects to something like even like an instrument, right? Like you have like tuning and you have like playing at this octave or whatever. So if you can kind of think about it, it's almost like that relates to these aspects of the cosmos, right? And when we talk about like as human beings, okay, well, how does this relate to us? Like, we don't have a golden gauntlet with a bunch of shiny stones in it, right? So how does this relate to us, Ryan? Well, we do have these things called chakras, which just happen to be the same color as these stones. So, I mean, that is a little bit of an interesting point, or a conceptualization or parallel that we have here. And interestingly enough, if we do not use the actual film version, I think the version of the images that I have up on the screen right now is actually is showing them in the form that they appear in actually the TV series known as Avengers Assemble, which is actually the almost correlating representation to their color aspects. In the movies, they kind of switch it up and make the stones different colors and stuff like that. But in the TV show, they kind of have them really represented with the same colors and aspects that there are in alignment within the energy centers of the human body and the chakra system. So it's interesting that those parallels come to fruition and come into view. And when we think of that, well, what could be the meaning behind that? Well, I think that it kind of stands to reason that maybe if a human being was able to tap into their very divine essence, like if you were able to tap into the very depth of your consciousness, maybe you would have the ability to rewrite aspects of the world or of the cosmos, right? Maybe you would have the ability to see very extreme or profound change, right? And usually, like I'm gonna reference a little bit of last Airbender here, just with like when the guru's teaching Aang to open his chakras, he's teaching him that because life has like circumstances that we interpret as like good or bad, or like basically because life is, as he says in his words, messy, that the chakras can become blocked, right? So in most people, the chakras do not operate at their fullest capacity. Even in most people who follow like a guru's path or a yogi's path, a lot of the times the chakras are not always open to their fullest capability. Like maybe if you're a monk and you do something, or you do nothing rather but sit in one place and meditate all day long, then maybe your chakras are a little bit more open. But if you're somebody who actually actively participates in society and experiences the world actively, then you have a tendency to come into and out of vibration, right? And be receptive to these subtle changes that go on within the body. And with that comes experience, comes evolving of self, comes understanding who you want to be in this lifetime. But it also comes with you know what, I'm going to take a sip of water, but yeah, that was a lot of talking, but essentially it comes with the aspect that the chakras will kind of fluctuate, open and close. They will like provide energy through different chi pathways, right? Like a lot of times energy in the body doesn't always flow along the same pathway. It's almost like you can think about it like when you go to the gym and you do arms one day, the blood is going to flow differently throughout the body than if you were hitting legs, right? So because it's just where the energy is being directed towards, right? So understanding that the body working as one instrument is kind of the embodiment of these stones, or kind of the embodiment of the representational aspect of these stones when we talk about how they relate to a human being, is a fundamental concept, because it's talked about in traditional Chinese medicine, for instance, how activating different chi pathways leads to different states of healing, leads to different activation of energy centers and types of energy within the body. So all of this is relevant, and understanding that if you want a precise outcome to come from all of these aspects aligning, and all of these aspects essentially unfolding within reality in a specific way, then it's something that is a very, I would say, I'm at a loss for words to describe this almost, but it's an outcome that is very dependent on almost like the energy flowing along one pathway in the river, right? So it's almost like the rocks in the river have to dam all of the other aspects, all of the little mini flows in the river, so that it can flow along the one pathway, right? And when we talk about things like Kundalini, when we talk about things like the dormant energy from the root or from the sacral rising up to the higher energy centers and kind of like penetrating into these higher dimensions, then we're really getting to the concept that this can flow along one pathway. It can flow along one pathway and blast through all the blockages, but a lot of times the energy doesn't want to flow and break through those barriers if it can find an alternate route, right? Think of it like water, right? If you have water in a stream, the water will follow the path of least resistance, right? And the only way that you can essentially make the water flow in one path is by damming all the other pathways of the water, or finding some way to direct the water in that one specific pathway, right? And with that, when it relates to the body, it means that you are activating specific energy centers, you're activating specific chakras, you're activating specific nadis or chi pathways, and by doing that, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? You acquire a certain outcome. That's the word I'm looking for. You acquire a certain outcome. And when you acquire a certain outcome, you are tapping into this almost, this very subtle mechanism. You can almost think about it if all the stones, or relating to the chakras, let's say if all the chakras were something that you can conceptualize, think about it if your whole body was like a radio, and within the radio there's all these little dials, and they all relate to one aspect of the cosmos, right? It relates to space, mind, soul, reality, time, and power. If all of those are dials that exist within the human body, you can dial them the way that you need to get on the frequency that you want to be on, right? And I was actually listening to this book the other day. It's actually by Frederick Dodson, and it's called Reality Creation. Or here, let me pull it up actually here while I just have my phone. But it's a very interesting book. Nobody's getting any free advertisement here, but Create the Reality You Prefer by Frederick Dodson. And essentially, he talks about in this book that almost that there are hundreds of radio waves like all around you. You can conceptualize, but you tune yourself, or you're tuning into one frequency, right, of that radio. I think it was from this book that I heard this, but in any case, the book is very interesting. So I digress. Back to this analogy, you can think about it as we're surrounded by all these mechanics, by these radio waves, and if you want to get on one frequency, they're all already in existence around you. The only thing that you need to do is tune the radio so that it's on the right frequency. If you want to hear a specific channel on the radio, all you got to do is adjust the dial, right? But if you're thinking that, oh look, it came back on. So look at that. Maybe that's the cosmic stones at work. In any case, if you want to get on a specific frequency, if you want to tune into a certain radio wave, if you want to tune into a specific station on the radio, if you're in your car and you're driving along and you want to hear another station and you just say to the radio, play me something I like, the radio's not going to do anything, right? But if you just turn the knob, then you can adjust the frequency you're on, and by adjusting the frequency, then you can get onto the frequency or the vibration that you want to be on, and you can tune into that channel, right? And then you are tuning into one channel out of hundreds of channels. All the channels are already in existence. All you need to do is adjust the dial, right? So it's the same thing kind of with these stones, right? Or chakras. If you want to produce a specific outcome, if you want to get on a specific frequency or get on a specific vibration or state of energy, all you got to do is adjust the dial. And by adjusting the dial, then you have this ability to tune into whatever aspect of the cosmos that you want to be on, right? But you have to do this with not just objectivity and awareness, but with a sense of understanding that this is a process that is very, very specific, right? If your dial is off by even like 1 hertz or 2 hertz or 3 hertz, you can end up on a completely different channel, right? So you have to be very intentional about the outcome that you want, right? And that's why, these yogis and online gurus always trumpet like visualization, right? And the reason why they trumpet visualization is because you can get very specific. You can get very specific with what you want. You can get very specific with the details. And sometimes like visualization is not easy, right? So another thing that a lot of like wealth creation people talk about, right, in like business, for example, is writing out your goals, or writing out the things on your to-do list, or writing out the thing that you want to happen, writing out that which you want to achieve. And by writing out what you want to achieve, you make it material in the physical world, so you can actually direct your attention towards that thing. Okay, well, I want $1 million, right? That's materialized. Now I can see that, and now I can say, okay, if that's where I want to go, if I want to go to, wherever I need to be to get $1 million, that I have to be on that frequency. I have to direct my attention towards that thing. It's like you're Captain Jack Sparrow and your ship is the Black Pearl, right? You could have the best ship in the world, but if it's not going in the right direction, then, it might take you a very long time to end up at where you want to be, right? So it's all a matter of materializing or getting some kind of conceptualization of that which it is you want. And I'm not saying that is by any means just a straightforward path. Like, you might want a variety of different things, you might want money, you might want a nice home, you might want, a relationship, you might want all these different aspects, and you have to kind of compile that into a vision and compile that into something that you can materialize either by visualizing it or writing it out or whatever your methodology is, right? Like visualizing is a very right brain thing. Writing things out is a very left brain thing. But the thing is that they're both the same thing. They're just two different ways of having a conceptualization of something, right? So that's kind of what I have for you today. And, I'm not going to harp on this too much more, but it is kind of interesting, I would say, that we see a lot of overlap in film between what we've seen in history, what we've seen in film, what we see with the human body and human physiology. And again, chakras are a conceptualization of that, right? But they're a very fundamental one because they're based on a construct that is fundamental to all the aspects of reality or all the aspects of the cosmos that surround us. Light, right? If there was no light, what are we going to observe or be conscious of? There's nothing to be conscious of without light, right? So this is a almost primordial force. It's even talked about, like, in all the religious or spiritual books, the archangels are made from primordial light. So again, we see that aspect of light in all these aspects of workings of film and philosophy and spirituality and physiology. Light is always something that is fundamental because it's also, gauges what we see and how we interpret the world around us, right? We have 3 receptors in our eyes. We have red, we have green, and we have blue receptors, and they all relate to us perceiving reality in a certain way, or physiologically acting in a certain way, right? Like blue light keeps you awake, right? Red light relaxes you and makes your mind ready for sleep, right? And green light is kind of this soft melodic harmony between the two, right? So in any case, the point that I'm saying here is that film often mirrors our reality. It might not mirror it exactly, such as how the movies have switched up the color of the stones. I wonder why they would do that, They might be trying to, we're not going to, I don't know. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole with that, but I would just like you to maybe philosophize on your own about why that might be, But if divine power really is within you, and these stones do represent something that is an aspect of the cosmos, then all the abilities and aspects of the cosmos that you would ever need are inside you. All you have to do is figure out how to almost play the instrument, which is yourself. So I don't know if I could put that in a better way, but yeah, play the instrument, which is yourself. You're an instrument. You're almost like a cosmic tuning fork or radio that, is receptive to vibration and can adjust its vibration. And once you figure out that, you have a secret to life that most people don't have, because that affects every aspect of you. It affects your physical body, affects your emotional body, affects your mental body, it affects your causal body, it affects your etheric template, affects your celestial body, it affects your etheric body. So I know that, might not translate into much for, the normal human being, but the point is that it translates into every aspect of your being. So this has been Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. We're going to sum up now, and I just want to thank you guys once again for watching. If you guys have stayed tuned till the end, I do appreciate all the support that you guys do give me. And regardless if this is helpful to one person or a million people, as long as it helps somebody, my job here is done. And I encourage you to, again, follow me on Instagram at @top_sorcerer. Check out my other channel, Sword of Mercury. where I do content in a more, I guess, short form content, and also sometimes ASMR. I'm actually starting to incorporate also martial arts into that, just in terms of giving tips and how one might facilitate this mind body spirit connection. So if you enjoyed, I encourage you to like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Follow us on DC Media Hub, and this is Ryan signing off on Moonstruck. See you next time.